I would like to thank Town Hall Seattle for inviting me to give this presentation, and I appreciate your interest in coming tonight. This evening we are going to address three major questions. First, can technology solve major environmental and social problems? What are the limitations of technology? Second, why do most people believe in technological progress and uncritically accept any technology? Third, are there simple and effective low-tech solutions, and what can we do? So let me turn then to the first question. Can technology solve major environmental and social problems? What are the limitations of technology? Let me start out by pointing out two extremely profound limitations of any technology. First, negative consequences are inherently unavoidable. And second, these negative consequences are unpredictable by our scientific methods. So let me explain further. Negative environmental consequences of technologies are inherently unavoidable because because technology, when you apply it in the environment to manipulate the environment in nature, they violate a number of ecological principles that have been paraphrased as law of ecology by Barry Commoner. You might know him, an activist professor, environmental professor, as follows, these laws of ecology. Everything is connected to everything else. This law is violated by technology because if you use technology to manipulate nature or the environment in one area, because everything is connected to everything else, we will have unintended consequences somewhere else in the system. The second law of ecology is called nature knows best. And this means that over millions and billions of years of evolution, sort of a natural research and development in nature has occurred where a natural balance has formed. And when we come in with our technology to manipulate nature, we disturb this balance automatically and will have unintended consequences. And the third law of ecology, according to Barry Commoner, is there is no such thing as a free lunch, meaning that everything has a cost. If we use technology to manipulate the environment for our benefits, we will have to pay sooner or later. And our environmental crisis we have today is really are the costs that have accrued, and these are delayed costs, and they will sooner or later arrive. Now the question is, why are scientists not smart enough to anticipate these inevitable problems? The problem is the scientific method we have been using for several hundred years is not good enough for that. The scientific method is based on mechanistic reductionism, meaning we try to understand the whole of nature only by looking at isolated part, at isolated cause and effect relationships. Like when we do laboratory experiments, we only vary one parameter at a time. So we look only at one cause and effect relationship while ignoring all the other ones. And so the scientific method can never elucidate all the relationships that exist in nature. So we have this very strange situation that science has both power and weakness at the same time. It has the power to elucidate, the power to study isolated cause and effect relationships, and we gain a lot of knowledge that we can exploit with technology to manipulate nature for our perceived benefit. But at the same time, because we don't know the rest of the cause and effect relationships, all the unintended consequences, we create ignorance. Science creates ignorance, not only knowledge. It creates knowledge to exploit nature, but it creates ignorance at the same time what the unintended consequences might be of our manipulation. Now let me give you two examples of this. One is nuclear energy. Science has been extremely powerful 100 years ago to elucidate the chain reactions, the atomic chain reactions, and so forth, nuclear physics. And we have exploited that knowledge to build nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors. But science is not powerful enough to determine all the unintended consequences of these technologies of nuclear explosions, the radioactive fallout, etc., or Fukushima disasters, etc. Another one, more current example, is genetic engineering technologies. Molecular biology, the last 20 years, has been extremely powerful and was able to elucidate what the mechanisms are at a molecular level, and now we are applying this technology to have genetic modified organisms that we deploy on a large scale, like GMO crops all over the country, soybean, corn, etc. But science is intrinsically unable to determine the unintended side effects of this technology. So we have this very strange, or actually bad situation, meaning that negative consequences of technologies are both inevitable and unpredictable. So this is a very major limitation of any technology. Now, we have created all these problems with technology, and what do? We apply more technologies to solve them, and this is a Techno-Fix. That's why the book is named called Techno-Fix. What is a Techno-Fix? A Techno-Fix is an attempt to solve a problem with technology. A Techno-Fix addresses only the symptoms instead of the root cause. It is called a fix because it does not result in a real long-term lasting solution. Techno-Fixes are often used in an attempt to solve a problem caused by previous technologies, and we call that counter-technologies because they counter the effect of previous technologies, or to solve social problems, and we call that a social fix. Our society favors techno-fixes because it allows us to ignore large, intractable problems, problems that are either too difficult to solve or whose solutions are too controversial. Let me give you two examples. An example of an attempt to use technology to address a very difficult to solve problem are climate change mitigation technologies. Climate change, of course, is caused by technologies, basically fossil fuel combustion technologies, being it car engines or power plants, etc. And so we are trying to design counter-technologies that remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. And these are basically all techno-fixes. Let me give you a list of ideas that have been thought about, that have been proposed in the scientific community, what to do about rising CO2 concentrations, basically these list of techno-fixes. One is called geological carbon sequestration. Basically, people take the flue gases from a power plant and pump the CO2 deep into the ground. The problem is nobody knows how long it will stay in the ground, what the leakage rate will be, and if it leaks, or when it leaks, let's call it that way, what the health and environmental effects are. This shows that most techno-fixes, like all technologies, have unintended consequences, and that's why techno-fixes are not good. Another idea has been proposed but resisted by environmentalists is ocean disposal of CO2. Basically have a deep pipe going deep into the ocean, pumping CO2 in the deep ocean, but then that will result in the acidification of the deep ocean with unintended consequences on the deep sea biota. Then other people came up, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, about sprinkling fertilizer over millions of square miles of ocean. The fertilizer would increase phytoplankton growth. Algae basically would start growing and sucking out the CO2 from the atmosphere. The problem there, of course, is we have no idea what this large-scale eutrophication, these large algae blooms would do out there. Now, there are even some more bizarre ideas. Some people I read about, they wanted to put a gigantic space mirror the size of California in outer orbit to deflect the sun. So I have no idea how they would get that in an outer orbit, the size of California, okay? And somebody has even, maybe it was Ed Teller, I think, the father of the hydrogen bomb. He came up with another funny idea. I think he wanted to simulate volcanic eruptions or something to have this dust flying around, volcanic ashes and dust in the air to absorb the light. So we can see here these techno-fixes have all unintended consequences and never address the root cause of the problem. Another example of an attempt to use technology to address a controversial social problem is the social problem is overpopulation. So we are trying to use technology in an attempt to address overpopulation, so the problems of overpopulation, which are world hunger. And this is called a social fix. Now, we know already that increasing world population has produced an increasing demand for food, fresh water, oil, and all sorts of limited resources which are rapidly approaching depletion. We are not seriously addressing overpopulation because it is controversial to segments of society that seek advantage from it, like the business interests and religious groups, for instance. Instead, we witness a parade of techno-fixes such as the Green Revolution and genetic engineering to address problems of overpopulation like world hunger. But these techno-fixes have not and will not solve the problem of world hunger. Let's look just at the facts. 40 years ago, there were 900 million hungry people worldwide. Despite the Green Revolution and despite the promise of genetic engineering, today there are still around 900 million people, hungry people, so worldwide. So clearly, these techno-fixes have not worked and will not work. Why do we attempt to use technology to solve social problems? Because it is easier to apply technological solutions than to change people. It is easier to employ a few engineers to come up with solutions than to convince people to change their behavior in general. Another common type, or a very common type of techno-fix is efficiency improvement. We hear it all the time on the media, radio, that efficiency will solve our problems. Efficiency improvements are used in an attempt to reduce the use of limited resources, like more fuel-efficient cars use less fuel per mile driven, or to reduce pollution, like less carbon emissions for a car, for instance. However, there are two problems with all efficiency improvements. First, efficiency improvements often stimulate consumption of the limited resources that were supposed to be conserved. This has been known for 150 years. It's called Jevons paradox, according to Stanley Jevons in Britain, and also called rebound effect. Rebound meaning consumption rebounds after the efficiency improvement has been implemented. For example, you can do your own thought experiment. Let's assume you buy a more fuel-efficient car, some car that gets 40 miles per gallon instead of 20 miles per gallon. So you would think you would save 50% of fuel, you would cut fuel use in half. However, that is really not going to happen, most likely, because now your cost per mile driven is only half as much, so you start driving more because it is cheaper to drive. So basically, the energy efficiency improvement has stimulated more driving on your part and more fuel consumption than initially thought. So there's rebounding consumption. And this is exactly what many, many research studies have shown for years. Efficiency improvements, because they are generally associated with cost savings, stimulate consumption of the limited resources that were supposed to be conserved in the first place. So that's one limitation of efficiency improvements. The other one is total resource use, like fuel, is only reduced if efficiency improvements occur at a rate that is faster than the rate of growth in demand for these resources. So let me explain. Coming back to the example of car fuel efficiency, there will be only a reduction in fuel use if there is no increase in the number of miles people drive worldwide. More energy efficient cars won't help the environment very much if there's a substantial increase in car driving. And this is clearly confirmed by the data. For example, the automobile fleet efficiency, fuel efficiency of industrialized countries increased by 20% from 1974 and 1998, probably in response to the oil crisis in the 70s. So overall, cars became 20% more fuel efficient. So one would think that overall fuel consumption worldwide would have decreased accordingly. However, this has not been the case. Fuel consumption during that time period increased by 40%. Why? Because total passenger miles increased by 75% during this period. We had more people, population growth, more drivers, more cars, and longer distances driven. So as long as you have more driving going on, you can have the most fuel-efficient cars. The total fuel use will still go up. So to summarize then, why techno-fixes don't work? Well, they don't work because, first, as all technologies, they have unanticipated side effects. Second, they don't address the root causes and therefore don't offer long-term lasting solutions. And third, they cover up symptoms, and this makes the problems to continue to grow unchecked in scale and complexity. Basically, a bad situation gets worse over time. Now, one belief in our society is that technology will increase happiness. Otherwise, we wouldn't buy all these techno gadgets, iPads, cell phone, computers, TVs, cars, airplanes, etc. There's some belief that it will increase happiness, but when you look at the psychological and sociological literature, it does not. There is no correlation between technology, economic affluence, and happiness. Basically, our economic system is based on the utilitarian assumption that economic growth and material affluence increases happiness. This is our whole economic system. The last 200 years is based on that assumption. Unfortunately, that assumption is wrong. And technological innovation, technologies in general, technologies are the main driver of economic growth, according to neoclassical growth theory. The main driver behind material affluence, it's obvious. We buy washing machines, we buy cars, it's material affluence. Technologies are the main drivers behind increasing material affluence. So when people look at the data and see whether material affluence has increased happiness, there is no correlation. For instance, in the United States, per capita GDP, basically material affluence, increased 2.5-fold between 1946 and 1991 during this 45-year period. Increased 2.5-fold, but happiness, which was measured by sociologists every year, has virtually remains constant. So material affluence, no correlation to happiness. Even more extreme in Japan, there was a 6-fold increase in material affluence between 1958 and 1991, and there was no change in happiness. At the same time, science and technology, particularly advanced technologies, also destroy traditional sources of happiness. Traditional sources of happiness were or are, according to the psychological and sociological literature, social interactions with family, friends, and community, a very large source of happiness, satisfying and meaningful work, and closeness to nature. Modern life in modern industrialized nations, in life around technologies, life with technologies, has often drastically diminished these sources of happiness. For instance, community bonds have been destroyed by periodically uprooting people to increase industrial output. Basically, people are shoved around wherever they have to go to work in factories to meet the demands of technology, basically. I think Americans move on average every 5 years to keep their job. One technology particularly destructive to community cohesion is television. The average American, and probably European the same, watches 4 to 5 hours television per day. Television is a very individualistic technology, independent of media content. You basically sit in front of the screen, and the same could also apply to computer screens for that matter, but I'm focusing on television. You sit basically in front of the screen and interact as an individual with the screen. You are not talking anymore to your wife, to your kids, to your friends, to your community members. You are just focused on the screen for 4 to 5 hours a day. Can you imagine what significant negative effect this has on social interaction and sources of happiness related to that? Also, many industrial production technologies create conditions of repetitive, boring, alienating, and meaningless work. Think assembly line. Also, finally, technology is also responsible for our increasing separation and alienation from nature. We live in artificial environments surrounded by virtual reality. So in conclusion then, the major limitations of technologies are then unintended consequences cannot be avoided and predicted. Most attempts to solve social problems or problems caused by technology with more technology, i.e. techno-fixes, don't work, and technology has failed to increase happiness. So why is it then that despite of all of these rather significant failures of technology, we are still fascinated with technology and accept anything new so uncritically? Well, one reason for our extreme technological optimism and belief in progress is historical. We need to recognize that the whole concept of progress is a rather recent historical phenomenon. Hunter-gatherer societies and agricultural societies did not have a concept of progress, most likely because they have a cyclical concept of time. The seasons repeated themselves year after year. Time was seen as cyclical, and if you see time as cyclical, nothing changed linear with time to get better or worse with time. It always repeats year after year. The Greeks and Romans also had no concept of progress. It is only most likely with the rise of historical religions, those religions dependent on historical narrative like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that there was a change from a cyclical concept of time to a linear concept of time. And seeing time as linear allows the idea of progress to develop, because this is the idea of positive change with time. And of course, this whole idea of progress really took off with the Enlightenment, where it was believed that human reason was to bring about social and moral progress. Unfortunately, social and moral progress proved to be more elusive than material progress, and so the concept of human progress was quietly redefined and limited to material progress. And of course, material progress is supposed to be brought about by science and technology, and it is measured as economic growth. So that's basically the history. We can see this whole idea of progress started rather recently and has been sort of distorted into a material kind of progress, even though it was social and moral progress before. Now, why is belief in progress and technological optimism strong today, particularly in the United States? By the way, the United States, according to statistics surveys, is probably the most techno-optimistic nation on earth, okay? Well, why are we so optimistic about technology? Well, there are a number of obvious reasons. Technology, number one, technology has delivered the goods. It really delivers. It really has provided a lot of benefits. The problem, of course, is we don't know when the chickens come home to roost. As I said, all technologies have unintended consequences, and sooner or later we have to pay the cost. But as long as the costs haven't arrived, we are very optimistic about everything. We think everything goes to glory, great, okay. Now, the other one reason why we are so optimistic is because of mass media advertising. You turn on any TV, radio, whatever, even printed media. We are always promised that new technology will make us happy, will solve our problems, even though we know they don't really make us happy. But Of course, there's a lot of vested interest here by the corporations who sell these technologies to increase their profits, etc. So there's a lot of vested interest to keep techno-optimism alive. We also found in our research that ignorance actually is a basis of most technological optimism. We coined a law of techno-optimism. We call it optimism is inversely proportional to knowledge, meaning that the less knowledge you have about a technology, the more optimistic you are. And this is nothing really new. When I go to technical and scientific conferences and you hear new concepts presented by scientists or engineers, the people who are really not quite in this field, they are often very impressed by this talk and talk to the inventor or whatever scientist. But the people who are experts in the field are generally not that optimistic about it. They have much more guarded optimism, or maybe even pessimism about it. So, as I mentioned, the United States is the most techno-optimistic nation on Earth. Possibly, I mean, this is a hypothesis, possibly because scientific illiteracy in the United States is enormous. I give you some funny NSF, National Science Foundation statistics, survey statistics. 80% of Americans do not meet minimal standards of scientific literacy. 50% of Americans do not believe in biological evolution. Well, that's sort of maybe expected, but now something funny. 28% believe in astrology, okay. Now this is getting more funny. 25% in witches and 33% in extraterrestrial visitors, all according to the National Science Foundation. I'm not inventing this, okay. So anyway, scientific illiteracy is extreme, so techno-optimism is extreme. Why is excessive and unrealistic techno-optimism dangerous? Because it is preventing us from thinking about low-tech, real solutions to our problems. Another reason we accept technology so uncritically is the myth of value neutrality. The myth of value neutrality states, or it can be expressed as, technologies are simply neutral tools which can be used for good or evil purposes depending on who controls them. But this is not true. This is only true for the most simplest technology, like a digging stick or so, to hit somebody over the head or to plant some seeds or whatever. But for all advanced technology, the value neutrality myth is clearly this is clearly a myth. It's a false belief, because the more advanced the technology is, the more the values of the designer have been embodied or embedded in that technology. Because when a technology is designed, a new technology is designed, the designer or the corporation has to make choices what to include and what to exclude with this technology. And those values are embedded in that technology. There's no way around it. Let me give you a few examples. Nuclear energy. Nuclear energy plants are gigantic, complicated, and dangerous, yes, but they have a bias towards centralized control because they're so complex and large, and they have a bias towards environmental damage because of the radioactivity problem. Genetic engineering technologies commodify plants and animals, a clear value orientation. As I mentioned before, television promotes individualism and consumerism. Individualism independent of content, just because you're sitting in front of the TV for hours, and thereby it's an individualistic experience, a clear value orientation. So why should we be concerned about the fact that technologies are value-laden? Well, the problem is, as soon as we have these technologies and then they diffuse through society and everyone uses them, the values get adopted by the society and by culture, and often completely unknowingly. Actually, for instance, this whole idea of technology transfer from industrialized nation to third world nations, technology transfer, the values get transferred from one country to the other via technology. And then the third world nations wondered why their culture is changing so fast. It's because of the embedded values in the technologies that are transferred. So it's clearly dangerous to believe that technologies are value neutral. Another reason we accept technology so passively is the myth of autonomous technology. This is a false belief that technology has an autonomy of its own and therefore is an independent, uncontrollable force. Humans can't control it. Humans cannot direct it. It's sort of like this mega technology, like a juggernaut moves forward and we just get squashed by it. It's sort of like autonomous technology. One reason technological progress may appear autonomous is that many technological systems, because of their size, complexity, and mutual independence, have a rigidity, they call it capital lock-in, and inertia that is difficult to overcome. Think about our global car culture. We have hundreds of millions of cars, we have roads everywhere, we have pipelines, we have gas stations, we have tankers, we have, this is just like a mega technology that looks like it's taking over and working, it's an autonomous technology. And people feel trapped in these mega systems, but when they feel trapped, they unfortunately blame technology instead of the individuals, those individuals who made very conscious decisions regarding the direction of technological change. For instance, the car culture, this is not an autonomous technology. There have been conscious decisions made maybe 100 years ago by executives, politicians, etc., to have this technology in place. So there is no such thing as autonomous technology. Why is the myth of autonomous technology so dangerous? Because it diverts attention away from the need for democratic control of technology and critical evaluation before it is deployed on a large scale. Finally, another reason we don't critically question technology is related to the technological imperative. The technological imperative can be stated: whatever can be done technically will be done and should be done. Actually, Robert Oppenheimer, the inventor of the atomic bomb, he actually strongly believed in the technological imperative. He thought the atomic bomb should have been built because it could have been built, basically. So examples of the technological imperatives are: if it is possible to make synthetic organic chemicals in the laboratory, let's mass produce them and use them as pesticides, herbicides, etc. Just use them on a large scale. If it is possible to dam rivers, let's do it, even though it might damage the environment. If genetic engineering is possible, we must do it and create GMO, genetic modified organisms and crops, and deploy them over millions of acres in the United States. The technological imperative serves at least three purposes, all of them dubious. It is used as an excuse to avoid democratic deliberation as well as ethical decision-making with respect to the development and acceptance of innovative technologies. It makes new technologies appear inevitable by hiding the fact that technological development is directed by special interest groups and powerful social classes. As a result of this concealment, belief in the technological imperative discourages not only critical thinking, but also promotes a culture-wide passive acceptance of any new technology, no matter how destructive. So far, we have seen that modern technology is uncritically accepted. Also, it has very significant limitations and in many cases does not offer lasting solutions. What are the real solutions and what can we do? Let me start with a quotation from Albert Einstein. He said, "No problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it." Basically, this means problems created as a result of a limited view of reality are unlikely to be solved without improving our view of reality, without changing our worldview, without changing our paradigm. Unfortunately, our current worldview is based on the illusion of separateness. I call it illusion because even science has shown that we are interconnected to each other, to the environment, that there's this web of life. Many problems, from military conflict to environmental pollution, are the direct result of this incorrect worldview. As long as we feel separate, we feel it is okay, even ethically okay, to control and exploit, and we will use science and technology primarily for that purpose. A solution to our problems is possible only if we change from our current worldview of separateness to one of interconnectedness. As soon as we do this, as soon as we have this paradigm shift, as soon as we change our worldview, many other things will automatically change. For instance, how we treat the environment, what kind of economy we have, and what types of technology we develop. For instance, if we consider ourselves part of nature, we will not tolerate pollution. We would leave space for other species. We would not tolerate human population growth. We would not have endless economic growth. We would transition instead to a steady state economy, basically a zero growth, no growth economy, which has more or less a constant population size and more or less a constant material affluence. We would also develop different kinds of technologies. Technologies that are good for the environment and well-being of people. Let's call those environmentally sustainable technologies and socially appropriate technologies. There are three design criteria, they are very simple, three design criteria for environmentally sustainable technology. So this is not rocket science, it is very straightforward. The three criteria are: first, all energy and materials, all energy should come from renewable sources, and most materials should come from renewable sources, so this is a renewable condition. If we use non-renewables, like metals, for instance, we should recycle them close to 100%. And if we have waste, they should be either completely biodegradable, like in a compost pile, or they should be inert and non-toxic. As we can see, these are conceptually very easy conditions, but unfortunately they're difficult to put in practice because our current industrial system violates these three principles, these three design criteria. Most of our energy comes from non-renewable sources and materials. We have incomplete recycling, and we still generate persistent toxic chemicals that bioaccumulate in species. Now, we should also have technology that is good for people, good for people's health and psychological well-being. We call them socially appropriate technologies. Again, only three relatively simple design criteria. The technologies should be local and decentralized, like local consumption for local production, local production for local consumption. There should be human scale and easy to operate, and allow, thirdly, for humane, satisfying, and meaningful work. Again, conceptually very easy, but very difficult in practice, given that the current industrial system violates these principles or doesn't heed those design criteria. We have mostly centralized technologies, we have large-scale technologies, and we often have technologies that provide alienating work conditions. For instance, in factories, I mentioned before, assembly lines. We need to recognize that prior to the Industrial Revolution, most technologies were environmentally sustainable and socially appropriate. So there's no reason why we can't do it. It has been done before, we can do it today. And we do it today, actually, in at least one very key area, and that's local organic agriculture. this is a good example of an environmentally sustainable and socially appropriate technology, and we should expand it, and we should expand similar technologies for local production and local consumption in other areas away, not only for agriculture but other areas. Now, what else can we do? We need to have a more democratic control of technology. Let's face it, technology is a major force in our life. We wake up from the time we wake up to the time we go back to bed. We are surrounded by technologies, from iPhones, cell phones, whatever, computers, even microwaves, TVs, you name it. Despite the major impact of these technologies on our lives, most decisions regarding the development of new technologies are made by corporations and government bureaucracies. In most cases, the public is excluded from any meaningful debate. Currently, technology is designed for the profits of the 1%, and the 99% are manipulated by the media to accept any new technology. Clearly, this is a very undemocratic situation and has to change. The development of appropriate technologies is only possible if their design is guided by the values and interests of the people who will be using them, rather than corporate and government entities. Citizens will need to become involved in participatory design, it's called. Citizens should be included in the research and development planning process. Technologies could be influenced thereby at an early stage before it becomes entrenched. And this is not very difficult, again, conceptually. Currently, we have a two-stage decision process for technology, for technological development. The first stage is peer review by scientific experts and engineers, basically to see whether the technology even will work. The second stage is a business review for profitability, basically to see whether, if the company makes it, whether this technology will be profitable. So that's fine. But we need a third stage, and the third before a technology is commercialized, and that is a review by citizens' representatives to assess whether their technology, that new proposed technology, would have any social and environmental consequences that are unacceptable. Participatory design has actually been performed with success in Scandinavian countries. So if they can do it, we can do it as well. Remarks. I have some concluding remarks. Okay, sorry about that. If there are no more questions, let me summarize a few key points. Be critical of any new technology. Recognize that each technology has serious limitations, and that the application of technologies has always unintended consequences that are unpredictable by the scientific method. Therefore, don't believe that technology is going to be the main solution to our environmental and social problems. Instead, look for rational, low-technology solutions. For more information and how to become active, please visit www.technofix.org. Good evening.